The latest Firefly novel, Life Signs by James Lovegrove, releases March 16th, and it looks as though we're finally getting a resolution to perhaps the best hidden subplot in Firefly, Inara's terminal illness. Now maybe you're sitting there thinking, what? I didn't notice that subplot in the show at all. Well, you're not alone. The foreshadowing is super subtle, and all the clues easily pass under the radar because they make perfect sense taken at face value. To be clear, this isn't a fan theory I'm pushing. This was supposedly a planned future plotline of the show. I say this because I'm aware that this will sound like a fan theory, making fairly large reaches to get to a predetermined conclusion. I'll link to a video in which Morena appears to confirm this storyline at a convention in 2008. I'll add though that when you actually watch the video, I don't know how convinced I am that Morena actually knows one way or the other, and whether she isn't just saying something that the audience wants to hear. Supposedly this was confirmed on a 10th anniversary special in 2012 as well, but I haven't been able to find that show, so I don't know how reliable that information is. Regardless, since we're about to get a novel in which this storyline is clearly the central plot, I think it's reasonable to say that if it wasn't canon then, it will be soon. So with Life Signs about to release, I thought it would be interesting to compile all the clues that we see in Firefly that nod toward there being a bit more to Inara than meets the eye. I think it'll be interesting to see how many of these things will line up with the explanation that we'll get in the new novel. The first clip I'll show you is probably the most substantial piece of evidence. This is from the first episode, and it's when the Reavers are passing by, and we see everyone in the crew reacting to it. Let's watch what Inara does. Okay, so that syringe is obviously a suicide kit, right? Inara is preparing a last resort in case the horrible Reavers board the ship. No, it isn't. Joss Whedon says in the DVD commentary, very specifically, that it's not a suicide kit, but doesn't say what it is supposed to be. My observation would be that nobody else is preparing for suicide in case the Reavers board, and if this were a suicide thing, if you were just going to have a suicide kit at hand because you're out in space, it's dangerous, you never know, you might get boarded by Reavers and you might need a way out. Would a syringe really be the most practical method? Like, would there not be some sort of pill that would be faster to take and easier to administer and maybe more reliable? I don't know, maybe not. That's just my take on that. Apparently Tim Minear, who's the executive producer, said during the anniversary special that this syringe contained a drug which would kill anybody who tried to rape Inara, and that there was a plan for a future episode in which Inara would be raped by loads of Reavers, and Mal would later walk in to find Inara alive and surrounded by dead Reavers. So, maybe the show's cancellation wasn't such a bad thing after all. But if we think about Tim Minear's words, they maybe somewhat contradict the assumption that the syringe has anything to do with the illness plotline. But it could just be the case that Tim Minear was wrong, or was misremembering something 10 years after the fact. Or perhaps there wasn't even a firm consensus amongst the writers before Firefly was cancelled as to what this syringe actually was. If, however, this syringe does have something to do with the illness storyline, I can imagine it being incorporated along the lines of, yes, Inara brought out the syringe to euthanize herself, should the Reavers board Serenity, but the actual purpose of this syringe, the reason that she has it, is that it's some kind of medicine for her condition, and she's intending to overdose on it if the Reavers board. So the next piece of evidence of Inara's terminal disease is from Out of Gas. So, context, Serenity's engines and life support have failed. Have a listen to this conversation between Simon and Inara.
Always thought the name Serenity had a vaguely funereal sound to it.
I love this ship. I have from the first moment I saw it.
I just don't want to die on it.
I don't want to die at all.
I know. It's not much. If this were a fan theory, I wouldn't be convinced by it either. But it's legit a thing. This was supposed to be a clue pointing to Inara being afraid of dying from this terminal illness that she's got. So the following argument is from Ariel, And I don't know if this is truly part of this plotline, but I think it's worthwhile considering. In Ariel, Inara is absent for most of that episode because she has to go on some sort of annual health checkup in order to renew her companion license. Have a listen.
Shouldn't be more than a day or two.
Big stop just to renew your license to companion. Can I use companion as a verb?
It's guild law. All companions are required to undergo a physical examination once a year.
Like, yeah, okay. This could be totally nothing. This could have nothing to do with the illness subplot at all. It would make perfect sense just taken at face value. But it would also tie in nicely to the illness plot. That Inara's going on this health checkup. She says that it's just a routine thing, but actually she's having her condition diagnosed and getting kind of an update on how far it's progressed. So the next clue is from Bushwhacked. Have a listen to this conversation between, again, Inara and Simon.
Leaving your whole world behind? It's incredibly selfless.
They selflessly turned us both into wanted fugitives.
Oh, we're all running from something, I suppose.
We're all running from something, I suppose. Whatever this meant something. Inara's running from something. Another oddity of Inara that maybe points somewhat indirectly towards the illness story is just the fact that she's flying on Serenity at all. It's pointed out several times in the show that this is just very unusual behaviour for a companion. Look at what Harkin says later on in Bushwhacked.
You are a companion,
Yes.
and you were based for years on Sinon. It's only in the last year that you've been shipping out with the crew of the Serenity.
It's just Serenity, and that's correct. In a few weeks, it will be a year. Why is this important?
I'm just trying to put the pieces together. It's a curiosity, a woman of stature such as yourself falling in with these types.
Not in the least. It's a mutually beneficial business arrangement. I rent the shuttle from Captain Reynolds, which allows me to expand my client base. And the captain finds that having a companion on board opens certain doors that might otherwise be closed in.
Harkin's telling us that this is just very unusual to find someone like Inara on a ship like Serenity. We see a sort of almost the same conversation happening in Out of Gas, where Mal is sort of interviewing Inara, but maybe she's kind of interviewing him.
Let me ask you this. If you're so respectable, why are you even here? I mean, I've heard tell of fancy ladies such as yourself shipping out with big luxury liners and the like, but a registered companion on a boat like this? What are you running from?
I'm not running from anything.
Mal is also sort of hinting towards the fact that yes, she's actually running from something. Now, if we slightly go back in time in terms of Inara's own personal history, we get to see some of that in Heart of Gold. So this is a conversation between Mal and Inara's old friend Nandi, and she's kind of giving us a bit of information about Inara's companion backstory, as it were. Let's have a listen.
Something to be smiling at?
I trained as a companion, remember? I read people pretty well.
Well, that's nice for you.
She's a hell of a woman, ain't she? Inara.
Yeah, she's a cherry blossom, no denying. Expect you know her better than I do, coming up together and all.
Imagine I do. Did she ever tell you why she left Sinon?
Never asked.
Yes, you did. I don't know my own self. I was gone long before. And I'll tell you, it was a shock her leaving. She was special. There's 40 women in House Madrasa, and you'd pick her out in a second. Could have been House Priestess for years' time.
Is that right?
Had her eyes on it, too. Very focused.
Nandi kind of gives us another question mark. Not only why is Inara flying on Serenity, but why did she leave House Madrasa on Sinon in the first place? She establishes that Inara isn't just a companion. She's exceptional even within the ranks of companions. And Inara was ambitious, which this makes it doubly unusual that Inara is flying with brigands like Mal. And this wasn't even the only time in the series that Inara was suggested as being more than just another companion. If we go back to Shindig, listen to how Atherton describes her.
Half the men in this room wish you were on their arm tonight.
Only half. I must be losing my undefinable allure.
Oh, it's not that undefinable. All of them wish they were in your bed.
I'm looking for the boy with the shimmer wine.
Oh, she blushes. Not many in your line of work do that. You are a very singular woman. And I find I admire you more and more.
Now, my presumption is that Atherton knows a fair number of companions, and he is describing Inara as being particularly special, even out of that group. Now, the next clip, I don't know that there's necessarily much to this next one, but you sometimes hear fans speculate that there's a deeper meaning, so I'm going to show it for the purpose of completion. We're going to go back to Heart of Gold, and this is when Inara has just arrived and she's greeting Nandi.
Nandi, darling.
It's so good to see you, Mei.
You look wonderful.
And you look exactly the same as the day I left. How do you do that out here?
So, personally, I don't think that there's really anything to this, but sometimes you hear people suggesting that Nandi's words should be taken literally, that Inara is not aging somehow, and maybe that's somehow related to the illness storyline. Personally, I think that's a bit exotic, and I think that Nandi's just paying Inara a compliment rather than flagging up something that's incredibly unusual. The show leaves us with plenty to think about regarding Inara, but her mystery doesn't stop there. In the comic Better Days, Joss Whedon and Brett Matthews pick up the plot thread and add further intrigue to Inara. So, for context, the crew are on holiday on Pelorum, and Mal has gone to look for Inara. But what happens? He sees Simon exiting her shuttle. For unrelated reasons, he then gets knocked out and doesn't see any more. At the end of the comic, Mal confronts Inara as to why Simon was visiting Inara alone, and Inara reminds Mal that Simon is both her friend and a doctor, and he won't hear any more. That little sequence in Better Days, it's not a big thing. It adds to the Inara is ill plotline for sure, but also it crucially adds the fact that Simon probably knows about her condition, and yeah, it's perfectly realistic that he wouldn't have told anyone else because he's a doctor, so there's some confidentiality. I really hope that Life Signs reflects that Simon knows about it, that it reflects what we've seen in Better Days. Honestly, until Better Days, I kind of thought that they would just drop the illness subplot altogether after the show was cancelled, because all the clues kind of make sense on their own for other reasons anyway. They don't have to be leading towards some specific subplot or some specific conclusion. It would be much easier just to simplify the story and just pretend that had never happened. But the fact that they actually sort of incorporated it into Better Days, I thought was really cool. Which means that if it's not reflected in Life Signs, I think I'm going to feel kind of disappointed. Now, the story doesn't stop here. Things get a little bit more complicated. You're probably thinking the story goes something like this. Inara is an exceptionally talented and ambitious companion with a bright future. She learns that she has this terminal illness and therefore decides to leave House Madrasa and use her remaining time to see the verse. She falls in love with Mal and decides to leave Serenity because she knows they have nothing but a tragic end ahead of them, or something like that. Except, we actually got a totally different explanation for why Inara left House Madrasa already. In the last Dark Horse comic, No Power in the Verse, which is the last entry chronologically in the timeline, Inara reveals to Mal that she didn't leave House Madrasa of her own volition. During the war, Inara broke the companion code of confidentiality, which led to the deaths of many browncoats. For breaking the code, House Madrasa exiled her, but permitted her to continue practicing as a companion. Now, this story isn't mutually exclusive with the terminal disease idea. I imagine that, yes, when No Power in the Verse was written, they were probably trying to retcon the disease plotline away. After all, No Power is set about 2 years after the movie, and Inara is still apparently alive. But the two ideas can coexist. So, sure, Inara left House Madrasa because she broke the code, but that doesn't answer the question why she's sailing in a Firefly. She could go to another house, as indeed she does later on. She could set up her own operation anywhere that she likes. She could do pretty much anything she wanted. Like, she has plenty of options, even after being exiled from House Madrasa. So the question of why is she flying in Serenity remains open. So I think this is how Inara's story actually goes. Inara is an exceptionally talented and ambitious companion with a bright future. She breaks the code of confidentiality and is told to leave House Madrasa. She learns that she has this Keel's myeloma and therefore decides to use her remaining time to see the verse. She falls in love with Mal and decides to leave Serenity because she knows they have nothing but a tragic end ahead of them. In Life Signs, Mal discovers that this is the case, maybe from Simon, and sets out to find her cure. And presumably he's successful? What I'm not so sure about is what the justification in Life Signs will be for Inara remaining at the training house rather than rejoining Serenity. Like, if the idea is that she left Serenity because of this disease, which is what this book sort of suggests, well then, why is she not rejoining Serenity after she's been cured? So maybe she's not cured in this book, or maybe she is cured but decides to stay at the training house because she's kind of grown to like it there, she's made a home there, or maybe she just doesn't really see a future on Serenity with Mal anyway. There's a fair few continuity pitfalls here. I'm optimistic that James Lovegrove will handle them without a problem. For the most part, his previous 3 novels have not stumbled into any enormous continuity errors. However, it must be said that his biggest stumble so far is actually on this very topic. In The Ghost Machine, Lovegrove mentions that Inara has returned to House Madrasa on Sinon, and this is just totally false. Not only do we know that she isn't allowed to return to House Madrasa, but the training house we see Inara at in the movie is definitely not on Sinon. Sinon isn't just a central planet, it's one of the 2 capital planets of the Alliance, along with Londinium. Inara's story to Mal about needing help with the locals, and that's the excuse that she comes up with to try and get Mal to come visit her, makes no sense if the training house were on Sinon. And in the deleted scenes, Inara refers to the training house being a kind of like a new enterprise out on the rim. I really hope that Lovegrove has figured out this error and corrects it for Life Signs, and that we don't see that Mal gets the cure and then flies back to Sinon to give the cure to Inara or something like that. I hope that that error from the previous novel, which was just a throwaway line so maybe doesn't really matter so much, I hope that's been rectified. I find it a bit unusual that they chose to place this story between the show and the movie. I mean, I'm impressed that they decided to pick up this story at all. I would have been more tempted to have this story set after the movie, when Inara is actually back on the ship, but yeah, I can't really opine too strongly on that. I'm sure Lovegrove knows what he's doing. His first 3 novels were excellent. The only thing I'm worried about is that slight continuity error, but I hope he's maybe just reread No Power in the Verse more recently and has fixed that for his 4th novel. Hopefully when this book comes out in March, I'll post a review video of Life Signs and I can give my perspective on whether Life Signs ties up some or all of the clues that the show let down, and whether or not Life Signs is as compatible as I feel it should be with the No Power in the Verse and Better Days. I'm hopeful, and I'm really looking forward to Life Signs. The first 3 books from James Lovegrove were excellent, some of the best Firefly stories we've gotten since the show, and I'm sure Life Signs will be the same. Thanks for listening. Check out my next video.